Alright, here we go. We have expression notes. Talk about expressions and equations here. First up is expressions. What is a mathematical expression? An algebraic expression is a mathematical phrase that can contain ordinary numbers, variables, and operations. An example, 1 plus e. Okay, that e, as we see here, is a variable. A variable is an unknown value represented by a letter. An example are 1 plus e. E would be the unknown number, which is represented by the letter there. Okay, expressions come in many forms. Required to be solved in different ways. There's multiple ways to solve expressions. Most of the time you're going to simplify or combine like terms. We'll talk about that in a minute. The beginning of expressions will be plugins. For these expressions, you will be given several different expressions containing one or more variables. You will then be given the value of said variable or variables. Plug in the given value with into those variables and then simplify. It says solve, but you don't solve expressions, you simplify there. Okay, so I call these plugins plug-in expressions. Look at one here. Down here we're at 1. X plus 1 is our expression. We see that x equals 3 by what is given to us, so we plug it in. I like to use parentheses for the variable value. Anytime I plug in a digit or a value for the variable, I put it in parentheses just to keep it clear and keep track of what's going on in my mind. So we have 3 plus 1, which equals 4. Okay, move on to 2. We see our plug-in for number 2 for y is equal to 2. Y plus 1, we then plug it in. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Number 3 here, x times y plus 1, using the same values. X is 3, y is 2, plus 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. That's the beginning steps of variables, expressions with variables and plugins. Plugins are valuable because you will be required to simplify expressions that are more complicated than these by combining like terms. Once you do, you will then be able to plug in any number, any value for that variable, and your unsimplified one should result in the same digit, same outcome as your simplified one, and that's how you know you simplified correctly. Alright, our next step, as I said previously, is to simplify or combine like terms. Taking the next step in expressions, we will be asked to simplify the expression. This step is just combining like terms. I know it's a little small here, but if you want to give a peek here, we have 6 plus x times y plus 6. We have two variables we don't know the value of, but they're multiplying. So we can combine those two, as we see here, x times y, and then we just add our whole numbers, our digits there, and we get 12 plus x times y. Okay, during this step, we want to master the ability to recognize and combine like terms without solving for the variable. Because at this point, we need to be able to manipulate the numbers and the variables without getting the variables by itself. And again, it's not an equation, so we're not solving for that variable. Okay, so our next example here is 6 plus 2x times 3 plus 6. This one here. So 2x times 3. It is a multiplication problem, and with our properties we know that we can multiply we can condense that down. It's a multiplication problem. You're going to multiply 2 times x then times 3. So in any order those will work. So 2 times 3 is 6, and that gives us 6x. And then we just add our 6's together again, and we have our 12 plus 6x for that. Okay, so that's expressions. Very simple. Don't overthink. They can get confusing with all the different variables and powers and exponents with it, all kinds of stuff going on. we'll get there, and you'll have a very many examples of that and problems to deal with it. All right, now let's go into equations. Equations are different than expressions. The main thing to know is they are statements. Equations are statements. Okay. After mastering the skill of simplifying your expressions, we're ready for simple step equations, single step equations. An equation is a mathematical statement. Statement is a key word here, that two mathematical expressions are equal. Okay, now we have an equal sign. Let's go basic. An example, we have 1 + 1 = 2. And that is a statement because it is true. If we are looking at it with a variable inside it, 1 + x = 2, we all know that x = 1. We'll get into how we solve that step by step later on in more examples. Okay, we work many single step equations that include all operations, fractions, decimals, and integer skills learned up to this point in any of the past videos and all, etc. First thing about an equation is that it is a statement. It is true. So if you come up with a number at the end, for example, well, let's look at our examples. 1 + 1 = 2. That's true. 1 + 1 does not equal 3. Okay, so 1 + 1, or 1 + x = 2. X then must equal 1 to make this equation true. Okay, so whenever you solve an equation, you're going to solve for the variable. Okay, we want to solve for the variable. So it needs to be balanced out. Just like a fraction, if anything you do to the top, you do to the bottom. Here, anything you do to one side, you do to the other side, because it will not be equal. It will be an untrue statement there. To get x by itself, we'll take 1 away from both sides. Okay, that's 0. That gives us x = 1. And then we have 1 + x = 2. We want to plug it in. This is the part where we learn the plugins to double check our work. We are correct. Check that off. Good to go. Okay. Those are notes on expression and equations.